So this is more practice of difficult factoring from my quick review series. So we are going to go through all the problems that you see here and also all of these problems here. So this video really continues extra practice exercises from my review video on the same topic. So I'll drop a link to that video if you want to watch it in the description. You can get a free PDF of all of these problems with an answer key at divideandconquermath.com. Just go to the review section. Okay, so typically in a practice video, I just start plowing through the problems, so we're going to get right into it. Okay, so for A and B, what I'm going to do is I'm going to review the AC method versus trial and error. So for this first one, so I've got 3x squared plus 10x plus 3. So I talked about with trial and error that there's really two things that you've got to do to use it. So you need to figure out what two terms would make the first term. So 3x squared, 3x times x, and then what two factors would make this the second term, which would be 3 and 1. And ideally, with trial and error, you would be able to check this just by looking at it. So you can do that by doing, this is one term, 3x, times the outer terms, 3x. So 3x and 3x would not give you 10x, right? And that's the idea behind trial and error, right? So it's this idea that you're going to make a guess of how to get to the first and last terms. You evaluate that guess, and then maybe you make a new guess. And so the new guess is going to be 3x plus 1 and x plus 3. And now if I look at this, now I've got 1x plus 3 times 3x is 9x. 1x plus 9x will give me that 10x, so we're good to go. So we talked about using trial and error versus the AC method. So for the AC method, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 4 times 7, so that's 28. So I need two numbers that multiply to 28 but add to 12. Okay? And so if I just start writing out factors of 28, so this would be 2 times 14, 7 times 4, and 28 times 1. And those are all the ways that you can really multiply out to get to 28, right? There's no other way that it can be done. So looking at these, do any of these produce 12? None of them, right? And so actually for this one, and this is like a thing that you've always got to watch out for, right? This does not factor. So for the next two problems, we have really, these are really clearly sum and difference of cubes problems. So how do you know that? Well, first of all, there's a cube here, and 125 is a cube, as is 1, and then this is a sum, this is a difference. So this is, I talked about this in the review video, but like if you have two terms, one of them is clearly cubed, then you probably have the sum or difference of cubes. And then the other one, of course, also has to be cubed. So, of course, you also need to know your list of cubes, which I have here, so you can pause. So this is something that for some people, they forget these, and so you might want to just have like this list next to you if you're trying to review this and remaster this. Once you remember these cubes, then it gets a lot easier, comes to you a lot faster. So anyways, so what we talked about in the review video is the key to this is, so first you want to identify what's in the a cubed spot. So in this case, this would be x cubed, which would mean that my a in the formula will now be equal to x. And then in the b cubed spot, that is 125, which would mean that my b will equal 5. And so from here, now I'm just going to apply this formula. And you can pause the video if you would like, just to write it down or whatever, but I'm going to go ahead and just use it right out of the gate. So this is going to become x plus 5. So I always remember that the first part of the factoring formula, this sign matches this sign. And then the next part will be x squared minus 5x plus 5 squared, which is 25. And so the other thing I always remember is that it's always got this a squared, ab, and b squared this sign here is always the opposite of this sign. So I kind of remember that relationship between the formulas. So applying that again now for, say, D, so in the a cubed spot, I have x cubed, which again would mean that my a for this formula will now be x. And in the b cubed spot, I have a 1, which would mean that my b will equal 1. So again, you can pause the video if you want to read the formula over, but I'm just going to go ahead and apply it now. So this is going to be x minus 1. So again, first term here matches that sign. And then x squared plus x plus 1 squared, which is just 1. And again, this middle term here will be the opposite sign of this. So that's always how I remember that. Okay, so we've now reviewed a lot of the factoring techniques. The last one that we haven't talked about, which is the first thing that jumps out to me for this particular problem, is the GCF. So whenever you have a factoring problem, the first thing that you always think about is if there is a GCF. And I notice right away there's a y, so I can definitely factor out y. But then also, I notice 6, 24, 28, so I can actually also factor out a 2. So first things first, I'm going to factor out 2y so that this becomes 3x squared minus 12x plus 14. Okay, so now that I've factored out the 2y, now we have to kind of go through that exercise of like, well, can I factor this more? And so again, like this could be trial and error, AC method, you know, it's kind of up to you. So we have to play around with this a little bit. Now, in this case, since I'm not sure if this can factor anymore, I might find it easier to start with the AC method. So if I take 3 times 14, so 3 times 14 is 42. So let's think of then what are all the other factors of 42 to see if we can find any that might add to negative 12. And obviously these are all going to have to be negative factors since this is a positive number, but it needs to add to something negative. This is something I talked about in the review video. These are going to have to be both negative. Okay, so I'll write down all these factors, but in the back of my head, I'm looking for something to add to negative 12. So we can make this by doing 3 times 14. We can do 2 times 21. We can do 7 times 6, and of course we can do 42 times 1. So the question is, do any of these factor pairs add to 12? No, none of them add to 12. So since none of them add to 12, this is actually as far as this one goes. So it can be very tricky, right, to figure some of these out. It's not always immediately obvious as to what you're going to do with them. Okay, so now here's another one, 5x squared minus 2x minus 3. Okay, so if you haven't, I would say at least try, trial and error, AC method, whatever way you want to do this. I think we can probably figure this out using trial and error. So let's see. The ways to make 5x squared are going to be 5x and x. And then the ways to make negative 3 are really just going to be one factor has to be positive, one has to be negative. It's just going to be 3 and 1, right? And so I actually kind of like, so I want to explain how this works. And if this doesn't totally click right now, that's okay. Sometimes you have to hear the same explanation several times before it, like you have that light bulb moment. That's really, really normal. So, okay, so one of these has to be positive, one of these has to be negative. I need the middle term to end up negative. So as I'm thinking through this, so think about how these terms are bouncing off one another. The 5x is going to bounce off this negative 1, so that's going to create negative 5, while this 3 will bounce off the x. So I actually want the larger number to be negative. So also as I think through just the structure of this, I get this part here is negative 5x plus 3x, and that will give me my negative 2x. So that is a way on how you can kind of reason your way through trial and error. I typically find that trial and error is not so bad when you have like a prime number here and a prime number here. It definitely gets harder if they aren't prime numbers, but I think it's something that's worthy to practice. Okay, so we have these 4 left for this video, so let's keep going. But maybe before we do, if you are finding this helpful, I'd love it if you'd hit that like button, leave me a comment just to let me know how things are going, or maybe subscribe to the channel. Okay, so we are just going to go right into this. So starting with G here. So I've got 27x cubed plus 125y cubed. So 27 and 125 are both cubes. Obviously, x and y are both being cubed. So this is definitely going to be our sum of cubes. So we're going to be using this formula here. And of course, you can pause video if you would like to write that down. So in my a cubed spot, I have 27x cubed. So what will my a be? Well, the number part will be 3 and the letter part will be x. And then in the b cubed spot, I have 125y cubed. So my b will be 5y. Okay, so now I can factor this as 3x plus 5y. And this one I'm probably going to have to go in steps in. So I'm going to have all of 3x squared. Remember, I use the opposite sign here. So this will be minus 3x times 5y and then plus 5y squared. Okay. And now let's work that out. So that becomes 3x plus 5y and then 9x squared minus 15xy plus 25y squared. Okay, so now we are moving on to 9x squared minus 13x plus 4. So we can, of course, either just try trial and error with this, or we can do the AC method. I think I'll do both with these. So for this one, negative 13, the thing that my brain notices right away is that 9 and 4, if I sum those, that makes 13. So I feel like I can make a really reasonable guess on trial and error. So I'm going to leave the 9x intact, and then the 4 I am going to put in this set of parentheses. Let's see, but I have to put both of these as minus. These both have to be minus minus because the middle term is a minus. Now, look at how I've set this up. So now I've got minus 9x minus 4x, and that gets me to negative 13x. So that's trial and error, and then also just noticing like, oh, 4 and 9 will make 13. So I was able to make like a really reasonable guess. Now, if I wanted to use the AC method, what I could do is I could take 9 times 4, so I know that that's going to be 36. So now I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to 36 but add to negative 13. So that's going to be negative 9 and negative 4, right? It's like right there for you. So if I wanted to use the AC method just to round it out again, so I'm going to break up that middle term like you see here. So I break up the negative 13 into negative 9x and negative 4x, and then from here I can factor out 9x, so this will be x minus 1, and minus 4, so this will also be x minus 1. So this factors into 9x minus 4 times x minus 1. So it's the same and the same. But again, just the point I keep making about this can take a long time sometimes. It's great in a pinch, but practicing this in the long run will be a better strategy. Okay, so now I've got 20x cubed plus 125x squared plus 30x. So first thing I notice right away is there's definitely a GCF. The first GCF that jumps out at me is 5. So I'm going to bring out 5x really. So this becomes 4x squared plus 25x plus 6. And one of the things that you just want to get used to is after you pull out the GCF, did you pull out the right one, or are these numbers divisible by something else? I can't divide these by 5 again, so we're good to go here, but it's just a nice little check to do for yourself. Okay, so now let's see. I need to figure out how to factor this inside part. So I can go ahead and do, why don't we'll do the AC method here. So 4 times 6 is 24. So this one's actually not too bad to figure out. 24 times 1, well, if I take 24 times 1, then 24 plus 1 will equal 25. So that's that middle term that I'm looking for. Boom. So I can break that up. So I am just going to write this out separately. So 4x squared plus 24x plus x plus 6. Okay, so this will factor as 4x and then x plus 6. I'm going to put an invisible 1 out here so that I can factor this part. So this will factor as 4x plus 1 times x plus 6. Cool. So my final answer then, I think I'll just erase all of this because I'm kind of running out of room here. So my final answer will be 4x plus 1 and x plus 6. Okay, and for the final one, so I've got 4x squared minus 31 minus 8. So I'm just going to note with trial and error here. So the thing is, 4 times negative 8 gives me negative 32, and this is negative 31. So this is like one of those ones where I would probably default to trial and error because I think it's not going to be too crazy to figure out, because I'm probably just going to leave the 4x, the 4 and the 8 intact. So specifically, here's what I'm going to do. Let's see. I got to think about this for a second. Okay, so I want to get really close to the 31. So what I want is I want this 4 to bounce off of the 8. So I'm going to put a minus 8 here so that I get to negative 32, okay? And then on this side, I'm going to have a plus 1. Okay, so first of all, notice also kind of what happened here. Did I use trial and error? Yes. So first terms only, 4x times x makes 4x squared, and then last terms, 1 times negative 8 makes negative 8. Cool. But then the other thing is that I also thought about the structure of how everything bounces off of each other. So I knew that the negative 8 and the 4 would bounce off of each other to get me negative 32. And then I just put the 1 here. So negative 32 plus 1 will give me that negative 31. So you can always use that trial and error as kind of a guide, I guess. There's structure in it, even though it feels like you're just making random guesses. You can make really educated guesses. Okay, so that brings us to the end. So by the way, my review series has many other topics in it. So each topic has a refresher video, practice problems, which you're watching here. The practice problems come with a PDF and an answer key. So everything is organized at divideandconquermath.com. Just go to the review section and everything is there for free. And otherwise, I'm going to leave the video there. I'll talk to you guys next time.